Hello, sir. How are you, sir?
Doing
Very
fine,
good
thank you.
morning from Dhaka, and my very best wishes for a very happy new year. And I'm looking forward to your presidential campaign, and we are very much with you.
Well, thank you. I haven't actually declared yet. Never underestimate British media creativity. I said the same thing I've been saying, which is I'm considering it.
But
But
what
thank
we
you for the
what
good wishes.
thank you. But what we feel that United States needs a president like you who can really do something very extraordinary. You are a hero in our eyes. You know that.
Well, thank you very much.
And how are you, sir?
Doing fine. I'm ready to start whenever you are.
Can we begin the interview now?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Thank you, sir. So here we begin. We have today Ambassador John Bolton, who has announced of running in 2024 presidential election in the US. John Bolton served as National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump and as US Ambassador to the United Nations under President George W. Bush. Good morning, Ambassador Bolton, and
Glad to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, sir. And my gratitude for my newspaper for kindly giving us the time.
Glad
Um,
to do it.
in a recent article, you said that Trump's first most egregious mistake was negotiating with Taliban terrorists while excluding Afghanistan's legitimate elected government, which the US helped create at such cost in US lives and treasures. We are already witnessing that the Taliban jihadists are pushing Afghanistan towards dark era, where the rights of women and human rights are being grossly violated. Under such scenarios, my question is, what United States and its allies can do to save Afghanistan from the grips of Taliban jihadists, number one. Number two, and for taking any further measures in Afghanistan, United States may need to once again tag Pakistan as an ally, though in the past Pakistan has betrayed with the US and used American money towards funding terrorists. How the US can achieve its goal in Afghanistan with an ally like Pakistan, which is already known for patronizing terrorism.
Right. Well, it was a grave mistake for the United States to withdraw from Afghanistan and to have NATO withdraw with it. As you said, I think the mistake goes back to the Trump administration and its initial decision to negotiate with Taliban alone, which undercut the government, which made people in the military and the government and civil society as a whole feel that the U.S. government was more interested simply in withdrawing from Afghanistan than achieving a real peace. I don't think statements made by the Taliban, commitments they may have made in the negotiations, whether it's Taliban or Haqqani Network or Gulbuddin Hekmati or whoever it might be, were ever credible. I don't think Taliban and its allies ever intended to adhere to some of the things that they promised as a condition to get the United States to withdraw. So tragically, what we see in Afghanistan right now was entirely predictable. And the negative consequences that the U.S. feels now being in greater danger of terrorist attack coming from Afghanistan, the strategic vacuum that we left for Russia and China, and the terrible consequences for the population of Afghanistan, we can all see every day. So I think the U.S. response to this has to be, number one, no recognition of the Taliban government directly or indirectly. I think we should certainly try to provide humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan, not to the Taliban government, not to have them have any control over the supply or distribution of assistance that any foreign government provides. And then urgently speaking with leaders of the Afghan resistance to see what assistance we might be able to give them, communications assistance, certainly at this point, non-lethal military assistance. There may be many things we can do, but we need to know and have close conversations with the resistance. I think all of us were surprised at how quickly the Afghan government fell, including many people in Afghanistan who obviously didn't want Taliban to take over. So many were caught by surprise. There are resistance leaders outside of Afghanistan now. Soon they will have to return. We all remember the lion of the Panjshir Valley, Ahmad Shah Massoud. His son is now a leader in among the Tajiks and others. But we need to see more of a resistance structure. Now that brings me to the issue of Pakistan, which you have rightly said has been involved in the turmoil in Afghanistan for many years. And I remember what a former American diplomat who worked on the Afghan question for many years used to say, that the government of Pakistan was the only government he knew of that consisted of arsonists and firefighters at the same time. The arsonists were the people who have supported a number of terrorist groups, including in Pakistan's disputes with India, but also supported the Taliban and Haqqani Network and others. I think, and now in Pakistan itself, we've got a very complicated situation with respect to the government and who's in charge and what future political events we're going to see. But I think the U.S. perspective should be that it's not in the long-term interest of the government or the people of Pakistan to support terrorism. It may seem advantageous in the near term in certain circumstances. Long term, it's never going to work. It's never going to benefit Pakistan. It will cause, as I think it is causing now, trouble inside their own country. So this is a conversation we've had for many years with Pakistan, but I think it takes on real urgency now because the Taliban are once again back in control across their border, and I think helping to contribute to instability inside Pakistan itself. So this is also something I think other countries in the region can help out with, but it's going to be complicated. I say that because it's been complicated before, and I don't think it's going to be any simpler this time.
Thank you. And now we go to the second question, Ambassador, that in Iran, anti-regime protest is continuing for many weeks now. In your opinion, can these protests succeed in ousting Ayatollahs from power?
Yes, I think they can succeed. I think the government in Tehran is weaker now than at any point since it took power in the 1979 revolution. I think we all should realize that there have been widespread economic protests in Iran for 4, 5, 6 years now, which were bloodily repressed by the government of Iran in 2019. But the protests have continued because the economy is so mismanaged. A country with all that oil wealth still finds people alienated throughout its territory. Now, these latest protests against the dress codes, the hijab and headscarf and things like that have brought 50% of the population into a direct attack on the rule of the mullahs. And it's not just about dress requirements. It's a challenge to the ideological legitimacy of the Ayatollahs. So when you add that on top of the economic discontent, I think it's very serious. The problem for the opposition in Iran today is that the government, through the Revolutionary Guards, the regular army as well, holds a monopoly on force. And they, going back to 2019, as I say, back to 2009, when people protest fraudulent re-election of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, government has not been reluctant to use force against its own people. One key difference here, though, is that the generals at top of the regular military and atop the Revolutionary Guard are hearing from their mothers and sisters and wives and daughters that they side with the people out in the streets. And I think that's the kind of thing that can have a real impact. We won't see it from the outside, but it can cause fractures within the top leadership in Tehran, and that's what could bring the government down.
In your recent article, Ambassador, you have said, I quote, we need to ensure that Ukraine doesn't become a second Afghanistan, unquote. In this case, what steps should be taken to ensure that Ukraine doesn't become a second Afghanistan?
Well, we were in Afghanistan, the U.S. and NATO allies and many others for over 20 years. And so the effect of our withdrawal sent a signal around the world that I think undercut American credibility and led some to question our staying power. In the case of Ukraine, this war began only in February of last year. We're basically 11 months into it. So that's a long way from 20 years. But already you see some leaders in Europe and some politicians in the United States saying, this has gone on too long. We need to cut off aid to the Ukrainians. We need to pull back. So I think that would be another huge mistake. I think, as I said before, the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a strategic disaster. And I think losing Ukraine, or even a part of Ukraine, to this unprovoked Russian aggression would also send a terrible lesson around the world, not just in Eastern Europe, but in East and South Asia as well. So this should be a high priority. And I would just say, notwithstanding the signs that in both the Democratic and the Republican parties in the United States, there are elements that are isolationist. There's no doubt about it. They remain very, very small minorities at this point. I think U.S. support for Ukraine remains strong, but I think you have to be vigilant. And I think you have to answer these isolationists before they become a more serious problem.
You said, Ambassador, that Abraham Accords has already are already bringing beneficial results and more diplomatic recognition for Israel globally. You said is undoubtedly coming. In this case, what initiatives Washington can take in stopping ongoing anti-Israel sentiment of some Muslim nations?
Well, in 1991, in the George H.W. Bush administration, I was Assistant Secretary of State for International Organizations and participated in the successful effort to repeal the UN General Assembly's 1975 resolution that equated Zionism with racism. It was a big victory to reverse that resolution, but it was a mistake to think that that would end the problem in the UN or in many countries around the world. I would have to say in Western Europe and in the United States, there's actually an increase in anti-Semitism today, unfortunately. So this is a problem. It's a worldwide problem. The U.S. is based, our country was founded in many respects on the basis of freedom of religion and respect for others to worship as they chose. I think the best we can do is set an example and try and explain why we think that philosophy makes sense, and hopefully it will spread. But I don't think we should be under any illusion. Countries like Iran and others try to propagandize against Israel and the United States. It's the little Satan and the great Satan, and it's just something it's a continuing issue that we have to be aware of.
Since 2009, a secularist government under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been vigorously confronting terrorism and religious extremism in Bangladesh. Now, in 2024, Bangladesh will be holding another general election where Islamists are trying to come to power. In the recent times, it is seen Islamists in Bangladesh are getting support or sympathy of the Biden administration. Don't you think for a Muslim majority country like Bangladesh with 180 million population, any Islamic government would pose serious threat to the region?
Well, I don't want to be accused of interfering in Bangladesh's election, but I would just say this, and I think it's applicable to all of our countries. The rise of religious extremism we've seen has been conducive to terrorism that's threatened innocent people all over the world. And the terrorism from Islamicist extremists over the past 3 decades has caused the most damage, has killed the most people in Muslim countries. So certainly the United States has been attacked by Islamist terrorists on 9/11. We all know that. But what people don't see is the accumulation of the terrible effects of terrorism in the Muslim world as well. So I wouldn't give any political advice to the people of Bangladesh, but I would say the idea that that the answers to the current problems that confront us is found in that kind of extremism is the wrong road to go down.
And in this case, you think that the international community, including the United States, they should cooperate with any government which is committed in combating Islamist terrorism?
Yeah, I think it's very important that the U.S. be consistent. There's not sort of good terrorism and bad terrorism, and we want to encourage everybody to live under the rule of law, and everybody's entitled to due process according to their own legal systems. But there's no upside for the United States in encouraging any political faction or government that's engaged in or supporting terrorist activity. I mean, I think our strength in this area comes from consistency. Nobody's perfect in that either, but I think we should be on the watch to avoid inconsistency.
The last question, Ambassador, you have announced of running in 2024 presidential election in the US. We know you are a patriot, a hero in America's war on terror. Once elected, what steps you will take to save the world from jihadists, from the threats posed by jihadists and religious extremists?
Well, I haven't actually declared my candidacy yet. I'm still thinking about it, but I do think it's very important for the United States to debate before the 2024 election the continuing threat of international terrorism. It hasn't gone away. The withdrawal from Afghanistan has contributed to foreign terrorists coming into that country, where they again now have a platform from which to plan terrorist attacks around the world. I think it's important for the United States to deal with threats wherever they arise to our national interests and our friends and allies, whether it's the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Chinese threats to Taiwan or elsewhere along its periphery, or the threats of international terrorism from the Middle East and Central Asia. So that, for me, would be a very high priority, and I think it should be for whomever wins the presidency in the U.S. in 2024.
Thank you very much, Ambassador John Bolton, for giving us your precious time, and hope in the near future you will visit Bangladesh.
Well, thank you. It's been a long time since I've been there, but I'd look forward to it. Thank you very much. And again, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Okay.